Welcome to the 9x9 live experience. Here we are. I am Brian Lang of Future Commerce, and
I'm Philip Jackson of Future Commerce, and we are so glad that you are here for the live experience.
Such an exciting time that we've had creating the 9x9 this year. This live experience is head and shoulders above last year's webinar. I'm so excited. We've been able to talk to so many amazing, insightful people that are part of the industry, that are, leading some of the best brands in the world. And today, actually, we have two of those people with us that helped create the 9x9 from the Future Commerce community. And I'm very excited to get to that content later, whether you're consuming this live or later. Just stick around because this is going to be amazing. Also, wasn't that music fantastic? Thank you, Philip Jackson. That is actually original music by Philip, and it is way cooler than you might even know. The way that Philip created the music was all focused around this concept of 9. And I think it'd be really fun just to, not to put you on the spot, Philip, but
I'm ready for
a very quick dive into this music that you made for this.
So there's two things here that I want you to take away. Number one is that we have taken the data that came from our partners at Surge.ai. We helped synthesize a bunch of that into our 9x9 report, but we took the data from that and we actually found a way to express the data musically, which is really, really interesting. And not only that, but we took this concept of 9 and we applied it in like 5 different dimensions onto this musical piece that we opened with that you saw right here at the beginning. So I'm just going to show you. It's easier to show you than it is to tell you. When you're composing a piece like this, most music is really in 4/4 time. We did this in 9/8 time. We did this at 81 beats per minute, which is 9 times 9. And one of those crazy things that we did was we decided, how can we actually make a piece that makes music expressed with 9s? Well, the 9th degree of the Western scale from the key of C. The 9th semitone up is A flat, and its harmonic minor is F minor. So this piece is written in F minor. A little sample of that piece right here that you just heard. And that little bass piece that we heard right there is actually the logo from the 9x9 imaged and expressed as a wavetable synth. The other thing
I'm nerding out so hard right now. This
completely
is so cool.
Crazy is we took the Carly logo as well and we did the same thing. And so as the song progresses, the waveform sort of becomes the Carly logo. And we took all of this data and we even took the randomized data from Surge.ai and we put it through and expressed it musically. You can kind of hear it here.
So
across.
Yeah.
So that is 9x9 expressed musically, and that is the thing that I think that we want to do differently in communicating our trade media, is that this stuff can be expressed with art, and that is what these brands have done. Is they have taken these ideas and brought them to life in the forms of products into brands that we know and love, and they are changing the world with it because they make an emotional connection with their customer. And that's really what brings us here today to the 9x9, is that emotional connection. And so why don't we dive in, Brian, into the live experience? Just a few notes of housekeeping, because we are glad you're here. You're going to want to watch this back again. So the recording's going to be available. We'll send it through right after this is all said and done. We have a big announcement later on. We didn't even get to that yet. Something huge, something huge that's going to change Future Commerce forever is coming here. So stick around to the very end when we make that announcement. And if you aren't subscribed to Future Commerce, subscribe on Spotify. We are more than a podcast, but the podcast is the heart of where conversations happen. And so you're going to hear a lot more about what Future Commerce is about in just a little bit. But before we dive in, I did mention our partners at Surge.ai, and we did partner with them along with two amazing companies who helped to back all of the category data that went into at least 2 that are represented here today. really our partners at Klaviyo. This wouldn't be possible without them. And really our partners at Shipium, this wouldn't be possible without them. And you're going to hear from them a little bit later. But Surge is this incredible platform that takes consumer signal, and it gathers billions upon billions of consumer signals that are found on social media, on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and Google, Amazon searches every day, and it indexes them for us to get real consumer signal around the things that went into this report. So we are listening to the actual voice of consumer as far as it's concerning to these brands. That is one part of our factor in our methodology. Brian, could you go over a couple of these others and tell us what some of those factors that go into the methodology of the 9x9 are?
Yeah, so as we did analysis of the companies that were nominated, we went through and we use the data from Surge. We also relied on our community a little bit to get feedback about the brands and hear what they had to say about them. We also looked at each of these different sections and sort of ranked each one per brand. So outlook and profitability, cultural relevance, which is the Surge one, earned media value, product innovativeness, and social consciousness. And so these were things that, you and I did research on each company that we looked at, and we were able to actually look and rank each one as we went through the process of reviewing the nominations, which came from our friends and community. So super, super useful and powerful. So I think that, those things all powered why 9x9, which, if you caught last year's report, you may have heard a little bit about this before, but 9 is a really important number in the world, and we felt like it was a good number to land on for this. It denotes wisdom. It's a way of thinking about things that's very symmetric, and it has a lot to do with really significance. And so as we looked at the brands that we're looking at, significance came to mind for us. And so 9 brands, 9 categories that are changing the world. And so that's really what we're looking for, is to sort of group these brands and the ones that you'll see here into categories that we have discovered and come across and have uncovered as we connect with others in our community and have the conversations that we have. And so these selected brands are fit into 9 categories, which we have broken down into sort of 3 specific cohorts, if you will.
Yeah.
And so
areas of evolution, really.
Areas
right?
of evolution that as brands look at the years ahead, we're going to look back and be like, oh my gosh, this year was a big step for this. And so, Philip, maybe you want to talk a little bit about the brand versus customer versus commerce part of this.
Yeah, I think when we were thinking about how, brands are changing the world, really, we don't have time to get into every one of these today, but from a brand evolution scale, really direct to consumer is changing how we all do business in the world. It used to be that you would go to a big retailer to be able to get anything. These days, you can go to any brand directly. The way that brands are orienting themselves around the next generation of consumer is also very important. The way that brands are putting customers at the center, not just making them fanatics, but actually giving them a seat at the table and developing the future of their business. These are the things that make up brand evolution. And today we're going to cover also in commerce evolution, how brands are becoming more inclusive by giving consumers more for their money. They're actually helping give consumers their product mirrored back at them that's built specifically for them in niche communities. And I think in the most important thing in inclusivity is that as the world gets more expensive to live in, we really want to celebrate brands that are still affordable and brands that are built to be, purpose built for the communities that really cherish them and being more inclusive in the way that they do that. So the world is changing and the way that we interact in commerce is changing. And that's really what 9x9 is all about. And this year's 9x9 is really the most thoughtful and most important look at brands and the significance of brands that we've ever taken. And so we're going to dive into that here in just a moment. We're going to cover brand evolution here today, this category. And in particular, we're actually going to jump into how DTC is coming of age, because we've heard a lot about the direct-to-consumer movement over the last decade plus, but it's really come of age in this last year, especially with the tailwinds following COVID-19. And so when we're looking at these brands and we're charting them out, there's certainly ones that are, household names and come to mind, but it's the nascent ones, the disruptors that really are more digitally native. They're younger, they're scrappier upstarts. Some of them are well capitalized, some of them are bootstrapped. But the way that they are entering their category and the way they're challenging the norms and the way that they're connecting beyond just e-commerce is what makes them truly relevant. And so with us here today, Brian, I believe that you're going to take a moment and you're going to sit down with Kris Gosser, and we're going to discuss with him exactly what that means for DTC to come of age.
Yeah. All right, and now moving on to the next part of the webinar, featuring Kris Gosser, Head of Marketing at Shipium. Welcome, Kris.
Hey, thanks. Happy to be here.
Kris, Shipium was a huge part of the 9x9 report, and you got to help us curate a lot of the content in the report, specifically the D2C comes of age section. Was a part that you sponsored, but honestly, like the amount of feedback that you provided us as a part of this report, it really did shape a lot of our thoughts. And so I'm super excited to chat with you a little further about this part of the 9x9 D2C all grown up effectively. So just to jump in, I'd love to just kind of set the stage a little bit. So we this is one of the categories in 9x9 because we're seeing just this huge shift. We saw explosion of D2C in the past 5 years, and then D2C has started to really have growth expectations put on it, and they had to start to figure out how do we move past just digital owned channels, and we're seeing a lot of that now happening right now. And even some of the front runners, the forerunners of this, are already out with big physical footprints now, and are doing very creative things to get in front of customers. And brands like Warby Parker are now able to go to IPO, and we're seeing acquisitions and all kinds of things happen now. The Warby Parker, Allbirds is getting valued. That's a pretty interesting one. I won't comment too much on that right now, but I do have thoughts on that. They all had to find a way, and a lot of D2C right now is having to find a way to really reach scale. And customer acquisition costs were just accelerated by the pandemic. It's already going up like crazy, and now it's even worse. So, what are some of the thoughts that you have about this next iteration where D2C is now expanding? They're getting into things that they've never been in before, and maybe they're hitting some walls as they do it.
Yeah, the coming of age has been fascinating, and really a lot of a validation of the initial business models and ideas that these entrepreneurs had. I mean, to see the successes of Warby Parker and Allbirds and Harry's, and Figs is a great story as well. There's just so many direct-to-consumer companies that have had great results so far. What's interesting to look at it, though, is the results have been powered mostly by a focus on the top line. So growing those organizations and the sales, the overall sales numbers based on finally diversifying channels, all of these different areas of trying to grow the customer base and loyalty. In many ways, though, they've reached the ceiling where they have to go to an IPO, or they've had some sort of an exit, like a care of, right? Because they've maximized as much as they can do on the growth side for now. And so now it becomes a bit more of a financial calculus between top line, bottom line, where things like margins and the unit economics and things like that come into play. I'm very interested to see now this second iteration or this second life of these businesses that have made it this far, to start to see what they do operationally to help reduce the cost per units, to improve their OPEX, really take on a lot of ownership of their operations to then improve it and make the kind of unit economics needed that the investor world want to see.
Yeah, totally. I think that's really, really interesting. And I think that you're absolutely right. And so I feel like this really plays into what Shipium is doing right now, and and the world that you're looking to optimize. Like this is a big part of that. Like what's that next step in like making sure that margin is actually addressed.
So at Shipium, I mean, we care about operations. Like that's the part of the organization that we have experience at Amazon, and the operations part of the business really becomes this critical juncture as the business grows. So one way to explain it is that we have this point of view that there is a prototypical life cycle to an e-commerce business that operations goes through. We have this kind of living document that's a bit kind of work in progress that you can check out at shipium.com/framework. And what this does is that our observation is there's 4 distinct stages, almost like life, right? So from birth to death, there's these 4 distinct phases like childhood and adolescence and adulthood and then eventually end of life. But those 4 stages, there's a very specific role that operations plays. The first stage called growth is really the sole focus of ops is to just help growth of the business, help that top line. So ops is doing things like making sure that your products are actually in stock and available, making sure that the channels are being built out the way that they need to be. So you can have multiple channels and everything that ops has to do to help the overall growth of the business is generally that focus. And if you want to peg it, a good normalization tool is probably just annual online sales. So the way that we view it is it's roughly 0 to about 25 million in annual online sales, where the focus of ops is really to just help the business grow. There becomes this point, though, right around 25 to 50 million in annual online sales, where the point of ops is to transition more to ownership. And that'll go from about 50 million to about $250 million. And in that phase of the business, the point of ops is to now come off your 3PL to take on ownership of different channels and things like that. Where what you're doing is you can't set up yourself for future growth of the business until you own these specific pieces of things like fulfillment and sourcing and things like that, because it's impossible for you to optimize the OPEX necessary to then get to that next phase of growth of the business unless you have ownership of those ops. So if a business just takes too long to take on ownership of their operations, open up their own FCs, have their own relationships with carriers, all these different things that are very kind of ops heavy specific things, then they're just going to hit the ceiling. But then right around about $250 million, ops then transitions to about 1 billion or so in annual online sales, where the point of ops is to now optimize the things that you've owned. And so these are things like what are the new technologies we have to implement, the new processes that we have to build out, what are the various things from sourcing all the way through to the delivery of product to the customer, the things we need to do to optimize the OPEX and the unit economics and things like that. And then once you hit about $1 billion and higher, then it's all about scale, where ops is doing all of the things all of the time. But there's really not that many companies that are higher than that. When you look at the market, there's 40 companies max, really, that do more than $1 billion in annual online sales. So there's not many up that high.
Yeah, and I think we're talking about like sort of that growth path for direct to consumer, and like a lot of them are not even touching that. In fact, I'd say they fall more into like that maybe into the 25 to 50 to 250 range. And that's the more successful ones, no less. Like that's the ones that have done things right, and those companies are they're entering into things now that they still haven't even really dealt with before. Things like, that you were just talking about, where it's like, oh, well, margin, like, and this is not an exact example, but like, look at Sweetgreens and their understanding of margin. Like,
yeah. Yeah, I just saw that too.
Yeah, like it's I mean, maybe they did understand and they just lied, so that's a totally different thing. But like, I I think that there's a challenge that a lot of these brands that have done a really good job, they knew how to acquire customers, they knew about flashy marketing techniques, they knew about how to get on the internet and do it well, but the rest of it, it was like, oh, like I gotta like run a business. Like I gotta figure out how to make money on this, not just like grow it and like do a good job of marketing it. And so and build cool products too. I don't mean to take away that from that. I think some of these brands have done a like phenomenal job with like product creation as well. But so talk to me a little bit about that stage in particular, and like that like that next level. Like, how does a brand go from like not understanding this to being able to operate in like an owned network at that scale?
Yeah, it's kind of funny because there's these other properties and attributes of the business that you start to see when it hits like the 50 million mark. They'll typically bring on a bona fide COO. They have a board now who's mandating things like optimizing cost per unit metrics, things like that. But the most important observation that kickstarts the ownership phase from the growth phase is they finally have the CapEx, either through investment, through the VC world or via an IP or something like that, or just through the growing annual sales. They finally have the CapEx available to now optimize the OpEx. And that situation is what causes the ownership to really kind of take off. So to give you some examples, is a 3PL generally has an operating model that charges a customer on more of a volume metric or a per unit basis. So it's impossible for you to get off any kind of leverage or ROI on a 3PL partner if you're outsourcing all of your fulfillment and things like that, because you can never save money the more that you actually use that thing. Whereas if you own your own FC, you own the technology that runs the FC, things like that, you get leverage off that, where now the more you use it, the more you actually save and the margins improve. And then you get into all of these various things. Like if you own your relationships with your carriers and you can diversify into multiple carriers, including regionals and things like that, you can then optimize the rate tables and the cost of what it takes for you to print a label and ship that thing, because it's tailored to your business and your shipping profile. And you can start to do all these crazy things like, hey, Brian wants to get this in 2 days. You can actually ship this with using UPS 5-day ground, and it'll get there in 2 days. And so you still hit that promise, but you save the overall margins there. There's tons and tons of that kind of stuff that in that ownership phase, you start to look at that improves margin.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And actually, I think that this brings up another point, which is it's sort of like by transitioning from a single 3PL to more of an owned network, then you eliminate that single point of failure. And I think that's one of the biggest problems that that a lot of these brands have, is that they have too many single points of failure.
Yeah, I'm certainly empathetic to that, because especially in that growth phase, I mean, you're just trying to make the business work. And I'm a longtime startup guy. I've really only ever worked in startups. And so I completely empathize with the situation of you just got to get stuff done sometimes. And so if you only have, say, one carrier, right, you only work with FedEx, that's fine, because you solve that problem. There's other problems that could probably kill the business that you have to go focus on, and you just move on, and that's fine. But really, that coming of age story and that 50 million to a $250 million phase, one of the reasons also why ownership becomes so critical of operations is because those single points of failure just don't work anymore. They become too much of a liability to both the performance of the business, but also the growth of the business. So you have to do things like move beyond working with just one carrier, like FedEx or the Postal Service. And you need to look into things like regionals, because snowstorms in the Midwest might screw things up. Or like right now you have Shipageddon happening, where FedEx is basically telling companies, hey, we actually are not going to be able to service all of the volume that we promised we would service you in your contracts. And oh, by the way, our rates are higher. So there's those single points of failure working backwards with carriers and shippers, with a single warehouse, with a single manufacturer. The more you take on ownership, the better ability you have to then move beyond just that single point of failure to really add in the flexibility of the business.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely essential for that next phase of growth. Speaking of that next phase of growth, just because everything's getting optimized and they're making investments in infrastructure and and making better decisions around margin and understanding that the delivery experience is part of the customer experience. It doesn't mean that customer acquisition is not a problem right now as well, and we're again, because the customer acquisition costs have been rising forever. We're seeing like gross failure of platforms to properly report or handle our money, like Facebook and Google, and maybe this whole digital thing is not what we thought it was, or maybe it is what we thought it was all along, which is not as cool or as good as we thought it was. And so, what are some of the ways that you're seeing modern brands start to get creative around how to do this, get discovery or, acquire new customers or enter new channels?
What I think is fascinating about this particular space, especially somebody coming from more of a digital space prior, that our CEO, Jason, who comes from Amazon, always talks about, is that there are atoms in play here. Like, there is literal physics that matter in this. And so the cost of acquisition and things like channels and advertising and whatnot, a lot of that will translate back to the physics of the actual business. So to give you an example, shipping speed and cost and things like that just happens to be an area that we know well, but I also think is a meaningful area that all of the e-commerce businesses in this stage should care about, because industry study after study and internal data at Amazon that we had access to, all of this stuff continues to keep pointing to the fact that customers want A, free shipping, B, fast shipping, C, fast and free shipping if they can get both, D, on-time shipping. Like those are things that matter a lot to a huge percentage of the customer base out there. Yeah. That if you can provide that, those are the edges that you can get when customers have options. And they will consolidate on those types of things. But it's very difficult to do that because it's not a promotion that you can just do like 30% off or something like that, or these other schemes and things like that to grow a business or diversifying advertising channels or whatnot. It's a very operations heavy problem that the CMO needs to merchandise the COO and what they're trying to do. So it's up to the COO to figure out, how do you actually do free shipping in a profitable way? How do you actually do 2-day shipping in a profitable way? How do you make sure your shipments actually get there in an accurate way, given that ship again is happening, things like that. And certainly when you hit this like 100 million a year in annual sales, a lot of growth to then get to 200 million, 500 million becomes these very physical and atom-based things that's just really, really hard to figure out, that kind of transcend the way that you might have gotten that first 100 million.
Totally agree. In fact, the data that we found from back in our Vision 2020 report said exactly what you're talking about. Like the free 2-day shipping is like paramount, and I think you can get into like even like further into the supply chain or into logistics, into reverse logistics. Free returns are also super important.
Yeah.
It's like,
which is a very physical problem.
Very physical problem. I think you're absolutely right. Yeah. It actually is sort of an atoms issue. Like, we're not talking about some ethereal like marketing concept. Acquiring customers means having the right delivery network and cost of that network. Looking ahead to the next 18 months, what are maybe a couple of like really good investments that brands that are in this range can make that you would recommend?
Sure. One is, I think, just a general promise to a customer. Promises help both the conversion pre acquisition, but also the loyalty. If I know when I'm going to get something, I'm more likely to buy it. And then similarly, if I do get that, then I'm more likely to come back and buy again via that channel or that brand or whatever the case may be. And so promises have been very, very hot this year for us. And I think it's only going to be hotter next year, especially as the holidays, I think, are just going to cause so much pain and anguish for the shopper. So certainly some sort of a promise as it relates to the order and the shipment of it. That would be number one. And then number two is investments into diversifying beyond these single points of failure. So I think beyond the promise concept, which was the number one thing in throughout this year for us, the ability to add multiple carriers is such a like simple, boring, non-flashy, non-sexy webinar thing to say that turned out to be one of the most critical and urgent things that brands that are doing 160 million a year in annual sales that we're talking to, right, are just scrambling to figure out because they were sending shipments 3 weeks late last year during December. And they just are so worried about that kind of experience again and having that hurt the brand. And it all stemmed from the fact that they were only using UPS or only using FedEx or whoever. And they needed to add in these regional carriers like OnTrack or LaserShip or whatever. And it's just like so boring and the kind of blog posts nobody would ever read about and the kind of thing that a CEO or a marketer of these D2C companies don't care about. But in the end is going to be such a huge critical investment next year that'll probably make or break how the holidays are handled.
Oh my gosh. I love that. That's a great way to leave it. Kris, thank you so much. Your thoughts are so appreciated. And just for the Future Commerce audience, you don't understand the conversations that Philip and I have with Kris are actually genuinely like some of our favorite conversations we have. He's never been on the podcast. He has written for us. Jason Murray, CEO, has been on the podcast. We love Shipium. Thank you so much for your support of 9x9 and your ongoing partnership. You're the best. And thanks for your thoughts.
Awesome. Thanks, Brian.
Brian, whoa, you went over time. Of course you did, because you just couldn't contain yourself.
Yeah, that's me. I can't stay within budget. You know,
let's get it back on track. Commerce is evolving. We know this. And the way that we expressed it in this 9x9, Brian, was that we found that not only are niche marketplaces emerging, not only are customers really connecting with wellness brands and what wellness means to any given category means something different these days than it did maybe even a few years ago. But customers are also connecting very deeply with private label inside of major retail. And so if you haven't read the report, we're going to give you a chance to do so here at the end. We're going to direct you right where to go. But I highly suggest that you dive in. If you wanted to take a look at the kinds of brands in this world, you know, that are really defining what it means to be inclusive. Inclusivity really is kind of running the gamut these days, isn't it, Brian?
Yeah, I think it's super important. And you touched on this at the beginning of the webinar, as you know, of the live experience. It's more than just including everyone from cultural perspective or diversity of ethnicity or you know, that those are all important, but also as we see a continued K-shaped recovery and a further widening of the wealth gap, making sure that brands are providing access and availability to the working class or those that are on a tighter budget, because otherwise we were talking about inclusivity and including all these groups, but we're actually missing out on the majority of the population. And that's kind of, it's sort of, it doesn't ring true If we're running a luxury brand and saying that we're inclusive and saying that we include everyone, but by nature we're actually exclusive because of price point. And I'm not saying that there's not a place for an exclusive brand, but I do believe that in the next evolution of brand, that there needs to be a set of companies out there, a group of companies, even potentially companies with different scales of offerings, so that more people can have access to their goods.
Yeah.
And so this is something that I think is extremely important as we look at this. And of course, that's just one facet of this. Inclusivity means a lot of things, and I'm very excited about this next session. Val Geisler, and you'll see Yelitsa Jean-Charles, founder of Healthy Roots Dolls, are about to do for us. It's going to be a really, really fun conversation. I already know the outline of what they're going to talk about. I'm really excited to hear what they have to say.
Yelitsa, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to talk to you because we are talking about inclusivity. That's the category that Healthy Roots Dolls was nominated in the recent 9x9 report. And I think inclusivity gets kind of boxed in. It's ironic, isn't it? Like the word inclusivity is kind of forced into this one definition. And especially in the world of e-commerce, oftentimes inclusivity is about like, oh, well, we have a diverse team, or we have a range of products in size or style or whatever. But there's so many definitions. And so I guess my first question for you is, when I say the word inclusivity, what is your gut definition of that word?
My gut definition of inclusivity. I think about not just people, but experiences and perspectives. So I think it's really easy to visually have like, oh, we have people of different backgrounds. We have products that are designed for this, but what stories are they telling and whose stories are they telling? So I think about that a lot, creating spaces, not just creating the space, but amplifying and giving the mic and things like, because we talk about like, oh, seats at the table and all this stuff, but it's like, okay, you can have a seat at the table and still not be equally represented and talked about or highlighted. And so that's not enough. And so inclusivity is not just about creating that space, but giving that space and giving that opportunity to others. And I feel like when I think about my own company and inclusivity, yeah, we're making diverse products in terms of like a doll that represents children that typically have not been seen on toy shelves, but it's not just for one person, and that's not just the only thing that we're building. That's not the only story that we're trying to tell.
Say more about that. What is the story that you're telling, or the multiple stories? Or, I think that there are people who will say that Zoe, the Healthy Roots doll character, that she is for a particular person. So she is for the little Black girl with different hair that she has not traditionally, maybe her parents grew up not loving their curls or not knowing how to care for their hair in meaningful ways. And so they're trying to raise a little girl in a different way than they were raised, maybe. So that's like one kind of standard definition of who Zoe's for. Who else is Zoe for?
I think Zoe's for all children. I think one thing that's been really interesting to watch is the breakdown of the toy aisle and how parents are approaching play patterns and purchasing products for their children. And so, growing up, we had this, is the word dichotomy, like this two types of toys, boys' toys and girls' toys. And it's, how do you gender a toy? And when people ask us, like, are you going to make a boy doll? And I'm like, how is this doll not already for boys? And it's breaking down these ideas of what is for children based on how they identify or how we identify them. And so that story there is, we want to create products that allow children to tell their own stories. So we're giving them these tools and saying, hey, here, take this and express yourself. Here's Zoe. We're not going to tell you what to do with her. We're not going to tell you how she should be played with, but we are going to tell you about this amazing hair that she has. that a lot of children you might see around you also have if you don't have it yourself, and you can play with it, and here's how to style it, and here's what this looks like, and here are different cultural hairstyles that you can try, and teaching them about that. And so I say Zoe's for everyone, because who doesn't love playing with hair? Like,
Right.
who doesn't appreciate a beautiful toy? And so that's the story we're trying to tell, is celebrating that hair, not just creating a representational toy for the children that look like Zoe, but for the children who have friends that look like Zoe or have seen people that look like Zoe. And in the long term, having an impact in terms of influencing how they see other people, because toys influence how kids think, act, and see themselves. So the more diverse your children's products are and representative of their world or their future or anything they could possibly want to be, whether that's an astronaut or whatever, the more opportunities there are for them. And so that's what we want to do. And that's the other narrative we have. We want to create a blank canvas for children through the multiple products we're going to design that I don't even know what they are yet. Could be anything, and let them run with that.
Why kids? Like when you were looking at the problem that you recognized, why was creating a kid's toy the path to the story you wanted to tell?
Because adults suck.
Yes.
They don't suck, but children are fresh. They're magical. And during those early stages of identity development, they're highly malleable and can be easily influenced. And that means that we can come in and be a positive influence that will stick with them as they grow and turn into adults, so that maybe they won't suck when they're adults.
Yeah, right. It's interesting. Like if I asked that same question, what is inclusivity to kids? They would probably be like, I don't know, because they don't really think about that. They don't have to think about how am I being inclusive in my friend group or in the people I interact with or who I choose to talk to. They just do. They don't.
They just play.
Yeah, they just play. They pick up a toy. But then we do, Healthy Roots dolls recently launched in Target stores, which congratulations. And I also want to acknowledge the challenge that faces that poses, because there is, everyone knows the pink aisle in Target. Where all the Barbies are, usually there's a bunch of dolls there too. And we all know the Lego aisle, the dark blue Lego aisle and the pink bright Barbie and dolls aisle. And so I think, we have a huge opportunity, and there's work being done, but there's also a lot of work to do. Do you get to influence anything about where Zoe's merchandised or how she's presented in the store when you work with partners like Target?
Yeah, so retail is incredibly new for us, and I know that bigger brands and companies that have existed for some time have working relationships with their retailers on out-of-aisle experiences, on placement on shelf, packaging, and things like that. What we control is the story we can tell from our packaging. Right now, we haven't talked about any other opportunities, but I'm sure there will be things in the future that we can do activations with our retail partners as we continue to grow. But what we focus on is being able to highlight our products. So recognizing that when you're shipping something directly to a customer, it's a completely different experience than seeing it on the shelf. And you have to remember that. So if you have like paper all around and no light can get in, they're probably not going to see your product that well. So thinking about what role you want your packaging to play and how it showcases your product, what language you're including, how are you driving actions back? Are you using QR codes? Are you telling people about other products? Are you introducing them to your founder? Are you introducing them to your story? Are you putting a maze on the back? Whatever that might be. Because I think about like cereal boxes as a kid. I would keep the cereal box just because of the games on the back of the cereal box. And so those are the things our team thinks about. But we'd love to do more.
So you mentioned language. Is language a place where you think about inclusivity and the way that your brand approaches making sure that Zoe is accessible to all different types of people?
Yeah, I think that's one thing we started shifting a little bit a couple years ago, because, it's very easy for people to look at dolls, and because of the ideas we have of gender norms and the products children are supposed to play with and go, these are for girls. And so shifting our language from saying these are for girls to these are for children, or, teaching children how to play with their hair or teaching children how to style hair. So, it's not always perfect, but we're working on that transition and keeping it consistent. And then also really early on, we used to talk about how we were creating these for children of color and like focusing on the Black experience. But while that is true in terms of our founding story, that's not the only person we want to use our product. And so changing that language from, this is for kids with curly hair to this is a curl friend and anybody can have curl friends.
Yes, I love it. Do you see a wide variety of customers? I don't know if you have that data or if you see different types of purchasing happening.
Yes. We don't have data points. Like if we don't have like a survey we've done. We do have a Facebook community where we see a couple of our customers. I think about 25% of our customers convert to joining our Facebook community. And then we also just get a lot of content on social. So people tagging us, people tweeting at us, people tweeting at me. And so we get to see it. And a lot of purchasers are like grandparents and parents and, some aunties and some uncles and guardians in general. And a lot of babies with dolls that are almost as big as they are.
Yes. Yes. I think that inclusivity carries over into the way we talk about adults in kids' lives, that you talking about your grown up versus your mom or your dad or because not everyone's situation is the same. And just the way you talked about children versus girls, making sure that in the way we talk about family structures, that we're talking about grown-ups and kids and not moms and dads and boys and girls.
Exactly.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to make sure I asked you about is living in this toy space and dolls, and there's all different price points of toys, which amazed me when I became a parent, that how expensive some toys can be. And I think inclusivity, we'd be remiss in not mentioning price point on products. Do you think about obviously Zoe's high quality toy, so there's a certain price point that she has to be at in order to get that kind of quality. But then do you look for, I want this to be right now, her price is under $100, which is more expensive in the world of like the grand scheme of toys. But in the world of like these really high quality dolls, she's really not. She's definitely more accessible and inclusive as far as price point. Do you think about pricing in the world of inclusivity?
All the time. Think about pricing all the time. Working on new products, looking at the costs, looking at landed costs, looking at retail, and figuring out how do we how do we price to cover our costs, have a bit of profit margin to continue growing and producing other things in general for the company, but also being accessible to customers. And so that's something I've always thought about from the beginning. And while we can't control things like material costs, we can increase production, which ultimately lowers your costs, and then also provide solutions to customers, whether that's providing multiple payment methods. I love Afterpay, Klarna, all of those payment systems, ShopPay. I think those are great ways, especially for like Christmas gifts. And I think the most important thing we can do is always highlight the value of the product and the relationship that children are going to have with it. Because there are toys that people have for a lifetime, and that is what Zoe is. She's not just a toy you play with and you throw away. This is a doll you're going to have, and you're going to give it to your child maybe, or another child, and they're going to be like, oh, this is, well, they're probably going to, they might not think it's cool, but it's cool to us. And so we look at it as a lifelong investment because of the impact it can have on children at an early stage. And so that's what we always talk about, especially what makes our product unique with the hair play and the styling. And from there, adding on value adds through the unique experiences with accessories and whatever else that we build out. And so while it is a higher price point, we always talk about the experience, we always talk about the value, and are always working on new ways to add to that.
It's really important, and you're doing incredible work. Is there one thing that you make sure you ask when you're building your team, when you're talking to people who are going to support the business, whether it's another retailer or a contractor who's working on some ads for you or something like that? Is there something that you ask them that is an indicator of their willingness to be inclusive, or their general inclusivity in their lives? Is there something that you kind of screen for when you're having those conversations?
So we always are looking for people on our marketing team and on our product team that have an understanding of our audience. So you have to be able to speak to our product and understand it and tell me what's different about it. I've actually had some, you get sales emails marketers trying to, yeah, we can get you a 12x ROAS and whatever, da 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 da. And I'm like, okay, that's cool. One time I think I responded to a particular email because they had put a certain type of language I didn't like in comparing us to a company that wasn't even relevant. And I think I responded with, I will give you $100 if you can actually do a hairstyle on my doll. If you can actually do this doll's hair, I'll give you $100. Since you know so much about this. And so it's one of those things where it's like, you have to understand our products, you have to understand our audience, and if you don't, you need to explain to me how you don't and what you're going to do to bridge that gap. And so on our operations team, we also talk about, like, do you understand that you're essentially Santa and making sure these products get delivered to people? And are you ready for that pressure? Yeah, on the marketing team, it's all about knowing the audience, understanding the product, understanding the experience. Because it's not just, oh, it's another brown doll. It's children have been underrepresented for so long. And we are coming into this space where people have a deep connection to the experience we're creating because they were denied that opportunity. And you need to understand what that means in terms of the social issues in our country and how that's impacted people. And if you don't, you need to learn.
Well, you're leading by example, and we're just so grateful for you. And I can't wait to see what happens over the next year, and we can feature you even more in next year's 9x9.
We'll see. We'll see. I know, you never know. You never know. I'm doing my best. And I think one thing, like, people are always asking me what's next. And it's like, I can't tell you what's next because I came up with the first idea, but I might not come up with the next one. And there's somebody out there that's going to join our team and create the next major product for us.
Well, that's true inclusivity right there, is that your entire team is making important enough to make those business decisions, and that it's not just a top-down situation, but that you're hiring for that kind of like high slope of people who are ready to step up and help make guiding business decisions for the future. That's really special.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here today. I really appreciate you. Keep going.
Thank you so much.
Well, we are, right here at the end. You stuck through this. We do have a major announcement here in just a minute. But if you haven't, for some reason, you're watching this and you haven't actually seen the report yet, we want you to go get it. The brand new version that's updated with all of these market maps and a lot more visuals than what we had in version 1. Version 2 is now out, and you can get it at 9by9.report. It's available now for download. And if you have already downloaded the report, it's not going to do anything more than just give you that brand new updated version. Go visit 9by9.report and get your updated version today. Okay. Cannot wait. This seriously is it's a defining moment for future commerce. We are so excited to announce that we are launching a brand new show. We are like right at the forefront of a brand new property that we are launching in coordination with our newest host at Future Commerce, Ingrid Millman-Cordy, who is going to help us take Future Commerce to the next level with this newest show, Infinite Shelf, which is available right now wherever podcasts are found.
And with that, we would like to welcome Ingrid Millman-Cordy to the stage for the announcement of her show. Welcome, Ingrid.
Hi, Brian. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, we're very excited to have you, and we're very excited about your show. You have been a part of the Future Commerce family for a long time, but now it's official. Tell us a little bit about the upcoming show.
Oh, man, I'm so excited. We have been brewing this for what feels like forever, and just now is such a good time to launch this style of show. It's basically just the type of show that I have been wanting to listen to, and I am a huge, huge podcast lover and listen to everything from like Future Commerce all the way through How I Built This and all those amazing podcasts. And there was never one that felt really, really human connected, and something that wasn't so specific like e-commerce and everything is about e-commerce, or operations and everything is about operations, but it's just like, from an operator standpoint, everything is everything, right? Because we're needing this more robust and complete conversation. And certainly I'm guilty of this as being like the digital lady. So everything has always been so centered around digital. But quite frankly, all of the best programs that I have ever run or been a part of are a blend of physical and digital and old ideas that are tried and true, and new innovative ideas, and just like, how do we take what we've learned from the past, bring it into the present, and then really just frankly remembering that what's at the center of all of this is the humans. So that's kind of where it sits. It's this talk radio, informative. We're going to have a little fun. We're going to laugh about the silly stuff that's on the internet, and then hopefully take away some important things back to our teams, back into our souls, and just realizing that everything is sort of centered around this human experience that we're all sharing and trying to improve.
That's so fun and so good and so modest. Hopefully take away your wealth of experience is something that I'm looking forward to learning from as a part of this show. And I also think that you're going to have some incredible guests on the show too. So I cannot wait. I am going to be an avid listener, obviously. But I would listen even if it wasn't a part of Future Commerce. And so this is super, super, super cool. We're very, very thankful that you want to do this with us. And we're looking forward to this launch, which is today. Yay! So go on to Spotify, search Infinite Shelf, and you will find your next gem of a show. So either it's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google, whatever it is, whatever player you use, get over there and listen right now. Subscribe. Ingrid needs to be in your ear every week. And you will learn something and you will have fun doing it. So, yes. So excited.
It'll be very, very fun. I'm very lucky because in my years of being in this space, I've developed some fantastic relationships and frankly friendships that I want to just have conversations the way that I would just with Brian or with people that I've known for all these years, and just be inspired by them, and hopefully you'll be inspired by them as well. So yes, Infinite Shelf, come hang out with me. Also, I'd love to hear your thoughts and just start the conversation on all of the socials as well.
There it is. Big announcement.
And that's it. We are so excited that you would spend, I'm so humbled. That's the word I'm looking for. I'm so humbled that you would spend any time with us at all, but to spend your full hour is just so humbling. And thank you. Thank you for all of your support. FutureCommerce.fm is where you can get everything that is Future Commerce. And Future Commerce is so much more than a podcast. We do have original research. We put out deep dive guides every month. We're putting out original research every quarter. And we have these two giant, big omnibus reports that we do that come out of our community and go to consumers and get real data on what is making the world of commerce a better place. And that is Vision and 9x9. But if you want something of Future Commerce in your inbox every single week, twice a week, we put out two pieces, The Senses and Insiders, and they are both really, really incredible. The Senses is a newsletter that comes out every Friday that distills this week down to a topic of concern and tells you why you should care about it and how it matters to you and your business. And Insiders is a long form essay that we publish every Tuesday or Wednesday, depending on mine and Brian's schedule. That's at least 13 to 1500 words, but is enlightening you to new emergent ideas and things that we think are worth your time. You can get all of it at futurecommerce.fm/subscribe. Thank you so much for watching the 9x9 live experience.
We did it. We did it in like an hour. Did we actually make it?
I think we might have made it. We're a little bit over. It's fine.
All right. Yeah.
Thank you so much for watching.